10 Apache men stood at her door through the blizzard, asking for shelter after 17 winters of living alone on the mountain. Solace Freeman pressed her back against the cabin wall, rifle barrel catching the firelight from within. Snow whipped between them like angry spirits. The wind carried their voices before she could see their faces. Deep, weathered, speaking in careful English meant for her ears. She had heard stories of giants walking these peaks. Never believed them until now. The tallest stepped forward. His shadow stretched across her porch like spilled ink. Ice crystals clung to his dark hair, and his breath formed clouds between them. Mountain woman, his voice cut through the storm. We ask for shelter. Solace tightened her grip. The wood felt cold even through her gloves. Behind him, 9 others waited, each one broad enough to block starlight, each one still as carved stone. We have nowhere else to go. The words hung in the air. She knew that feeling. Had carried it for 17 years up this mountain, through seasons that tested every bone in her body. The knowing of having no place left to run. But she also knew the weight of secrets, the danger of strangers, the price of trust given too freely. Barn. The word came out harder than she intended. Until the storm passes. The leader nodded once. No gratitude in his eyes, just understanding between two people who had learned to expect little from the world. She watched them move through the snow. Their steps left deep impressions that filled quickly with fresh powder. The youngest among them stumbled. Another caught his arm without looking back at her. Solace lowered the rifle but did not set it aside. Through her window, she watched them file into the barn. Saw the leader pause at the doorway, studying the main house, taking measure of her defenses, the reinforced door, the shutters that could be barred from inside. Smart man. She bolted her door, checked the window latches, moved to the back room where she kept the things that mattered most. The tin box sat exactly where she had left it, covered by an old quilt her grandmother had sewn. Inside, papers that could hang her, memories that could break her. The storm rattled her roof. She had built this place to weather anything the mountain could throw at her. Wind that could strip bark from trees. Snow that buried entire seasons. Cold that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. But she had not built it to weather visitors. She made coffee with shaking hands. The beans were getting low. Another month, maybe 2, and she would need to make the journey down to Millfield for supplies. A journey she made twice a year, quick and silent, money changing hands without questions asked. The cup warmed her palms. Outside, the wind began to die. She could hear movement in the barn, low voices, the sound of men settling in for a long night. Through a crack in her shutters, she watched their shadows move against the barn walls. One of them had lit a small fire. The smoke curled up through gaps in the roof, disappearing into the storm. They would be gone by morning. Had to be. 17 years she had lived by that rule. Nothing stayed. Nothing lingered. Nothing put down roots deep enough to threaten the life she had carved from this unforgiving ground. But morning came gray and bitter. The storm had passed, leaving drifts higher than her windows. She opened her door to a world transformed. White stretched in every direction, broken only by the dark line of trees and the thin column of smoke still rising from her barn. They were still there. She pulled on her heaviest coat, loaded the rifle, crossed the yard through snow that reached her thighs. Her breath formed clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The barn door stood slightly open. She could see them inside. The leader sat against the far wall, one leg stretched out in front of him. Dark stain on his pant leg spoke of injury. Blood, maybe, or infection. The youngest knelt beside him, hands working with practiced care. A healer by the look of it. The others sat in a rough circle, sharing what little food they carried. 10 men, each one tall enough to duck under her barn rafters, each one carrying the weight of some unspoken burden. She understood that weight. The leader looked up as her shadow fell across the doorway, no surprise in his face, as if he had been waiting for her to come. Storms passed, she said. Yes. He made no move to rise, neither did the others. The youngest continued his work on the injured leg, fingers gentle against what looked like an old wound torn fresh. Road will be clear by afternoon. Will it? She studied his face. Deep lines around his eyes. Gray threading through his black hair. A man who had seen too much of the world and found most of it wanting. You planning to stay longer? That depends. On what? On whether you can spare the kindness. The word hit her like a physical blow. Kindness. When had anyone used that word in her presence? When had she last heard it spoken without mockery or calculation behind it? The wind picked up again. Fresh snow began to fall, light flakes that danced through the barn door and melted on the packed earth floor. She looked at the injured man, at the careful way the young healer worked, at the faces of the others, weathered and watchful but not hostile, not threatening, just tired. One more night, she heard herself say. Then you move on, the leader nodded. One more night, she turned to go, then stopped. There's a well behind the barn, water's good, and clean straw in the loft if you need it. Thank you. She walked back through the deepening snow. Behind her the voices resumed. Quiet, careful, the sound of men who had learned to speak softly in a world that listened too closely to their words. At her door she paused. Looked back at the barn where 10 strangers had changed the rhythm of her solitude. One more night, she told herself, but the snow kept falling. One more night stretched into 5, then 10. The injured man's fever broke on the 3rd day, but fresh snow kept falling. The mountain had trapped them all together. Solace carried food to the barn each morning, set the pot down just inside the door, never lingered, never spoke unless spoken to. The ritual became a careful dance of proximity and distance. The youngest one, the healer, always thanked her, soft voice that reminded her of wind through pine needles. The others nodded their respect, all except one. The broad-shouldered one with scars on his knuckles watched her with suspicious eyes, followed her movements, made note of where she looked and where she didn't. His stare felt heavy as winter stone. She learned their names through listening. Tahoma, the leader with the wounded leg. Keem, the young healer who spoke to her herbs with reverence. Ayana, the suspicious one who paced the barn like a caged wolf. They learned nothing of her name. She intended to keep it that way. But the mountain had other plans. A section of her roof gave way under the weight of snow. Ice-cold water poured through her kitchen ceiling, soaking her stores of grain and dried meat. She stood in the flood, watching months of careful preparation dissolve into muddy ruin. Tahoma appeared at her door. His leg still favored the left side, but he moved with purpose. We can fix this. She started to refuse. The words died in her throat when she saw the others already moving. Gianna climbed onto her roof without being asked. 2 more gathered fallen timbers from her woodpile. Keem sorted through her damaged supplies, separating what could be saved. They worked without discussion, without payment, without expectation of anything beyond the work itself. She had forgotten that people could move through the world this way. By evening, her roof held strong. Her kitchen floor dried clean. They had refused her offer of payment, though she had little to offer anyway. Instead, they filed back to the barn as if nothing had changed. But something had. She found herself lingering at the barn door when she brought their evening meal, listening to their voices carry across the space between them. They spoke of places she had never seen, tribes and territories, families scattered like seeds on hostile ground. Why were you exiled? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Silence stretched between them. Tahoma adjusted his position against the barn wall. The firelight caught the deep lines around his eyes. We refuse to raid settler families. Your own people cast you out for that. Some debts can only be paid in blood. We chose a different path. Gianna spat into the fire. The flames hissed and sparked. Chose to be homeless, chose to wander, chose to beg shelter from strangers. We chose to live with ourselves, Tahoma said quietly. Solace understood that choice. Had made her own version of it 17 years ago. Some prices were too high to pay, even when the cost of refusal meant losing everything. She began staying longer during her visits, not speaking much but present. watching their hands work leather and wood, listening to Keem describe the healing properties of mountain plants she had walked past for years without seeing. The suspicious one, Ayana, never warmed to her presence. His eyes tracked her movements, noted when she tensed at unexpected sounds, watched her check the distance to the door whenever new voices joined their conversation. "What are you hiding, mountain woman?" The question came one evening when the others had stepped outside. Just the two of them and the crackling fire between them. His voice held challenge and something else. Fear, maybe. The kind that came from trusting the wrong people too many times. "Same thing you are," she said. "And what's that?" "The reason you can't go home." He studied her face in the firelight, searching for weakness, for the crack where truth might slip through. She had learned long ago to keep those cracks sealed tight. Outside, wind rattled the barn walls. The others returned, stomping snow from their boots. The moment passed, but Ayana's suspicion lingered in the air between them. That night, she stood at her kitchen window watching their shadows move against the barn walls. 10 men with nowhere to go, sheltering on her land. 10 strangers who had fixed her roof and asked for nothing in return. 10 witnesses to her existence in a place where she needed to remain invisible. She opened the tin box in her back room, stared at the papers inside, wanted posters with a younger version of her face, a name she had buried along with her daughter, crimes that would follow her to the grave if the wrong people came looking. The mountain wind howled through the trees. Down in the valley, she could see distant lights. The town of Millfield, where she traded for supplies twice a year, where questions were few and memories were short. But memories had a way of stirring when strangers lingered too long in one place. She closed the box, checked her door locks. Tomorrow she would tell them the snow had cleared enough for travel. Tomorrow she would reclaim her solitude. But morning brought fresh snow and news that changed everything. Keem burst into her kitchen without knocking, his young face pale with worry. Riders in the valley, armed men asking questions in town. Her blood turned to ice water. What kind of questions? About large men traveling together, about anyone offering them shelter. She moved to her window, pulled back the curtain just enough to see down the mountain slope. 3 figures on horseback, too distant to make out clearly, but their purpose was clear enough in the way they moved. Slow, methodical, searching. "Bounty hunters," she whispered. Keem nodded. "We need to leave. Today, in this snow you'll leave tracks a child could follow." "Then what do you suggest?" She let the curtain fall, turned to face this young man who had shown her nothing but kindness, who had repaired her roof and sorted her damaged supplies and asked for nothing but temporary shelter from the cold. "You stay hidden. Let me handle this." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were already too late. The net was closing around them all, and somewhere in her tin box, papers waited that would doom them both if the wrong eyes found them. The mountain had brought them together. Now it would test whether they could survive what was coming. The bounty hunters circled the valley for 3 days. Their tracks carved patterns in the snow, searching, always searching. Solace watched them through her spyglass until her eyes burned. Tahoma's wound had reopened. The stress of hiding, of keeping 10 large men invisible in a barn meant for half their number. The injury wept blood through his bandages. Keem worked over him with steady hands. The young healer had claimed the corner of the barn where morning light fell strongest. His collection of mountain herbs grew daily. Roots and leaves that Solace had walked past for 17 years without seeing their purpose. "I need willow bark," he said quietly, "and something for the infection." Solace knew where both grew, but her stores were running low and the hunters made trips to her usual gathering spots impossible. "There's a supply room," she found herself saying, "in the house." She had never brought any of them inside. The cabin was her final sanctuary, the place where her secrets lived behind locked doors and hidden panels. But Tahoma's fever was climbing. His skin carried the gray pallor of a man fighting poison in his blood. Keem followed her across the snow-covered yard. His steps matched hers exactly. No wasted movement. No sound beyond what the wind would carry away. Inside, her cabin felt smaller with another person. The young Apache moved carefully around her furniture, her belongings, respectful of the space she had never shared. The supplies are in the back room. She led him through her kitchen, past her small table set for one, past the shelf where she kept her few books, read so many times the pages fell open to favorite passages, past the chair where she sat every evening, watching firelight dance across familiar walls. The supply room door stuck slightly, swollen from the recent roof leak. She put her shoulder against it, and it opened with a soft groan. Keem stepped inside. His eyes took in the shelves of preserved foods, the bundles of dried herbs, the boxes of ammunition and medical supplies. Everything a person needed to survive alone on an unforgiving mountain. Then his gaze fell on the corner she had forgotten to secure. The old trunk sat partially open. Inside, visible to anyone who looked, were the things she had sworn to keep buried. A child's worn dress, faded blue with tiny flowers. A wooden doll missing one arm, and beneath them papers that could destroy her, wanted posters with her face 15 years younger. The name Sarah Mitchell printed in bold letters, murder in the first degree. Reward, $500. Keem went very still. His hands, which had been reaching for willow bark, froze in the air between them. She moved to close the trunk, but it was too late. He had seen everything. The child's belongings, the wanted posters, the careful way she had preserved both love and fear in the same small space. Your daughter, his voice was barely a whisper, was. What happened to her? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, wind rattled her windows. In the barn, 9 men waited for medicine that might save their leader's life. Fever took her, during our second winter in the mountains. Keem touched the child's dress with one finger, gentle, the same way he handled wounded birds and broken men. And the man you're accused of killing, my former owner, he tried to stop us from leaving. Self-defense. Not according to the law, Keem nodded slowly. He understood the weight of being judged by systems that saw some lives as worth less than others. His own exile spoke to that understanding. I won't tell them. Why? Because I know what it means to be hunted for doing what's right. He gathered the willow bark and infection herbs with practiced efficiency. Never looked at the trunk again. Never mentioned the name Sarah Mitchell or the bounty on her head. But something had shifted between them. A secret shared was a bond forged, whether she wanted it or not. Back in the barn, Keem worked over Tahoma with new urgency. The fever was climbing faster now. The wound had gone from pink to angry red to the deep purple that spoke of poison spreading through blood. Solace found herself staying longer at Tahoma's side, helping hold him steady while Keem changed bandages, bringing fresh water from her well, making poultices from plants the young healer requested. Jana watched all of this with growing suspicion. His eyes followed every whispered conversation between her and Keem, noted every meaningful glance. The careful way they moved around each other now, sharing the weight of unspoken knowledge. What did you show him in there? Yana demanded after the others had bedded down for the night. Medical supplies. Don't lie to me, woman. The firelight carved harsh shadows across his scarred face. This man had been betrayed before, had learned to smell deception the way wolves smelled blood on the wind. I'm not your enemy, she said quietly. Prove it. How? Tell us who you really are. Tell us why you live alone on this mountain. Tell us what you're so afraid of those hunters will find. The challenge hung between them. Behind Ayana, she could see some of the others listening. Not Tahoma, who burned with fever. Not Keem, who pretended to sleep. But the others. Men who had followed their leader into exile, who deserved to know if they were sheltering with someone who might betray them. Some secrets are kept to protect others, she said finally, and some are kept to protect only yourself. He was right, and they both knew it. Her silence protected her, but it also endangered them. If the bounty hunters discovered 10 Apache men sheltering with a wanted murderer, none of them would live to see spring. Outside, fresh snow began to fall. The hunters would be taking shelter in town tonight, planning their next move. deciding how to flush their quarry from whatever hole they had found. Time was running out for all of them. Keem appeared at her elbow. His face was grim in the firelight. "The fever isn't breaking. I need stronger medicine." "What kind?" "The kind that grows in places those hunters might be watching." She understood. The best healing plants grew in the exposed meadows lower on the mountain, places where fresh tracks would be visible for miles, where a person gathering herbs would be trapped in the open if riders appeared. "I'll go at first light," she said. "That's not your risk to take." "It is now." She looked at Tahoma, burning with fever because he had chosen to shelter with her, at Keem, who carried her secrets without complaint, at Ayana, who watched her with suspicious eyes that held more fear than anger. 10 men who had nowhere else to go. 10 lives hanging in the balance while bounty hunters circled closer with each passing day. The mountain had brought them together. Now it demanded a choice, trust or betrayal, survival or sacrifice. She knew which path her heart wanted to take. Whether her courage would follow remained to be seen. The group split at dawn. 5 men wanted to leave immediately, fever or no fever. 5 others refused to abandon their leader. The barn divided into silent camps of loyalty and survival. Gianna stood at the center of the fracture. His scarred hands clenched and unclenched while he stared at Tahoma's burning form. The fever had worsened through the night. Shallow breathing, skin hot as forged metal. "We carry him," said one of the men backing Yana. "Better to die moving than trapped." "Better to let him heal," Keem replied without looking up from his patient. "Heal where?" "In a wanted woman's barn while bounty hunters circle closer." The words hit the air with sharp edges. Solace felt every eye turn toward her. The secret Keem had promised to keep, spoken aloud in anger and fear. "What did you say?" Tahoma's voice came weak but clear from his bed of straw. Yana's face went hard. "Ask your healer what he found in her house yesterday." Keem's hands stilled on the bandages. His young face carried the weight of impossible choices, loyalty to her or honesty with his dying leader. "She has papers," he said quietly. "Wanted posters, for murder." Silence stretched through the barn. Outside, wind moved through pine branches with sounds that might have been whispers or warnings. Tahoma turned his fever-bright eyes toward her. "Is this true?" "Yes." "Who did you kill?" "The man who owned me, and my daughter." Understanding passed across his weathered features, the kind of recognition that came from a lifetime of watching people fight systems designed to destroy them. "Self-defense. He was going to drag us back. I couldn't let that happen." Tahoma nodded slowly. Then he looked at his men, split into factions around his sickbed. "Anyone who wants to leave can go." 3 men moved toward their packs immediately. No shame in their faces, just the cold mathematics of survival. They had followed him into exile, but they wouldn't follow him into a grave. 2 others hesitated, torn between loyalty and the growing certainty that staying meant dying. "Go," Tahoma said again. "No judgment." The hesitant ones gathered their belongings. Within minutes, 5 of the 10 Apache men were moving through the barn door. Their tracks would lead away from her mountain, away from the bounty hunters, away from the wanted woman who had sheltered them. 5 remained. Tahoma, burning with fever, Keem, the loyal healer, 2 older warriors who had seen too much betrayal to abandon their leader now, and Ayana. His staying surprised everyone, including himself. "Why?" Tahoma asked him. "Because someone needs to watch her," Ayana said, staring at Solace with eyes full of suspicion. "Make sure she doesn't trade our lives for her freedom." The accusation hung between them. Fair enough, given what they now knew about her. A wanted murderer had every reason to bargain with bounty hunters, turn in 5 Apache men for the goodwill of the law. "I won't betray you," she said. "Words," Yana replied. "Easy to speak, harder to keep when they come with badges and guns." He was right to distrust her. She had been thinking the same thoughts he accused her of. Not betrayal exactly, but calculation. If she disappeared into the mountains, left them behind, the hunters would focus on the Apache men and might never learn about Sarah Mitchell's wanted posters. She could be free. Again. but freedom built on abandoning wounded people felt too much like the slavery she had escaped. That afternoon, she made her choice, gathered supplies in a worn leather satchel, ammunition, dried meat, the few pieces of jewelry she could trade for information or safe passage. "Where are you going?" Keem asked, watching her preparations. "Away, before I bring more trouble down on you. Running won't help Tahoma. Staying might kill him." She was folding her few spare clothes when she heard voices outside. Not the Apache men. New voices, harsh, confident, coming up the mountain trail. Through her window she saw them. 6 riders in long coats, badges glinting on their chests. The bounty hunters had stopped circling. They were coming straight for her door. In the barn, Ayana appeared at the door. He took one look at the approaching riders and made a decision that would damn them all. He slipped away from the barn, moved through the trees with practiced silence. While the other Apache men scrambled to hide deeper in the shadows, Ayana took a different path, down the mountain, toward town, toward the very bounty hunters who had been searching for them. Solace saw him go, understood his logic even as it terrified her. Better to control the information than let it be discovered. Better to make a deal than be hunted like animals. But deals with desperate men rarely ended the way anyone planned. The riders reached her door as the sun touched the mountain peaks. Their leader was a tall man with silver hair and eyes cold as January ice. His badge read U.S. Marshal. His face carried the look of a man who had never failed to bring in his quarry. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "Marshal Clayton Bricks, we're looking for some dangerous men. Apache. Thought you might have seen them." "Haven't seen anyone," she replied. Her hand rested on the doorframe, inches from where she kept a loaded pistol. "That's strange, because we have information that says different." Behind him, his men spread out across her yard. Casual, professional, blocking every escape route she might take. What kind of information? The kind that comes from someone who knows where they're hiding. Her blood turned to ice. Gianna had made his move. Traded their location for promises of safety that would never be kept. "Mind if we search your barn?" Marshal Bricks asked. It wasn't really a question. As his men moved toward the barn, she heard the sound that chilled her to the bone. Not horses or voices or the creak of leather. Silence. The Apache men had vanished into whatever shadows 5 large men could find in a structure meant for horses and hay. But shadows only worked if the people looking didn't know exactly where to search, and someone had told the marshal exactly where to look. "Actually," Marshal Bricks said, studying her face in the failing light, "I think we might have more than one prize waiting for us here." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. Even in the dim light she could see her own face staring back. Younger, angrier, but unmistakably her. "Hello, Sarah Mitchell," he said quietly. "You've been harder to find than expected." The net had closed around them all. In the barn, 4 sick and wounded Apache men waited for capture or death. On her porch, a federal marshal held her past in his hands. And somewhere in the growing darkness, Ayana was learning that some betrayals destroyed the betrayer along with everyone else. The mountain wind carried the smell of snow. Another storm was coming, but it would arrive too late to save any of them. Marshal Bricks smiled when he saw the recognition in her eyes. The cold expression of a hunter who had finally cornered his prey after years of searching. "My brother owned a plantation outside Savannah," he said conversationally. "Good man, kind to his people, didn't deserve to die the way he did." Solace kept her face stone still. She had learned long ago that showing emotion to men like this only fed their hunger for power. "Shot in the back while chasing down runaways," Bricks continued. "Left a widow, 3 children, all because some ungrateful woman couldn't accept her place in the world." "Your brother tried to drag a sick child back into slavery," she said quietly. "I stopped him. You murdered him." Behind Bricks, his men moved toward the barn with the confidence of people who knew exactly what they would find inside. Someone had drawn them a map of her property, told them about the Apache men hiding in the shadows. Yana emerged from the tree line as if summoned. His face carried the hollow look of a man who had made a bargain with devils and discovered too late what the true price would be. "Marshal," he called out, "we had an agreement." Brix turned toward him with the same cold smile. "Did we? I don't recall promising anything except to consider your cooperation when deciding how you die." The truth hit Ayanna with visible force. He had betrayed his brothers for nothing. No safe passage, no mercy, just the privilege of watching them all captured before facing his own noose. "You gave me your word. I gave you hope." Different thing entirely. Brix's men had reached the barn now. She could hear them moving inside, searching the shadows where wounded Apache warriors tried to make themselves invisible. "Found them," one of the deputies called out. 4 figures emerged into the fading daylight. Tahoma, supported between 2 of his men because fever had stolen his strength. Keem, carrying his healing supplies because even in capture, he thought about tending wounds. The 2 older warriors, faces set in the stoic acceptance of men who had always known this day would come. Gianna stared at them with eyes full of horror and regret. His betrayal had accomplished nothing except ensuring they would all die together instead of scattered and free. "Impressive," Brix said, studying the captured Apache men. "Bigger than the stories claimed. Should fetch good money from the territorial governor." "And the bounty on the woman?" one of his deputies asked. "Dead or alive, the poster says. Makes things simpler." The words hung in the cold air between them. No trial. No chance to tell her side of the story, just execution disguised as justice. But 17 years of mountain living had taught Solace Freeman things about survival that no plantation owner's brother could understand. She stepped back toward her cabin door, casual, unthreatening. Her hand found the loaded rifle she kept just inside the frame. "Don't," Brix warned. "Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "For who?" The rifle came up smooth and natural. Not aimed at any person but pointed toward the sky, a signal more than a threat. "You kill me here, Marshal, and you'll never get down this mountain alive." "That's supposed to scare me." "Should." She pulled the trigger. The shot echoed off the mountain peaks with a sound that rolled and multiplied through the valleys below. Once, twice, 3 times as the echoes bounced between stone walls. In the sudden silence that followed, they could all hear what was coming. Voices calling from the forest. Movement through the trees. The Apache men who had left that morning, returning with reinforcements. Brix's confident expression wavered. 6 deputies suddenly seemed like too few when faced with an unknown number of Apache warriors converging on their position. "Bluff," he said, but his hand moved to his gun. "Maybe. You willing to bet 6 lives on it?" More voices now, closer. The sound of men moving through underbrush with practiced stealth. Could be 3 fighters, could be 30. In the growing darkness, impossible to tell. Tahoma raised his fever-bright eyes toward her. Understanding passed between them without words. She had just committed herself to their cause completely. No going back now. No separate peace with the federal marshals. "What do you want?" Brix demanded. "Safe passage for all of us." "Not happening." "Then we all die here tonight, your choice." The marshal's deputies were looking around nervously now. City men unused to mountain fighting. They knew how to arrest shopkeepers and drunks, not how to fight Apache warriors in their own territory. "There's nowhere for you to run," Brix said. "I'll bring the army if I have to." "Army can't climb where we're going." She was thinking of the hidden canyon deeper in the mountains, a place she had discovered years ago but never used. Narrow entrance that could be defended by a handful of fighters, water and shelter and game enough to last through winter, assuming they could reach it alive. "Give me the Apache and you can go free," Brix offered. "Personal word. No pursuit. No. Even after one of them betrayed you." She looked at Ayanna, standing hollow-eyed in the snow. His betrayal had brought death to their door, but his reasons came from the same desperate fear that had driven all of them to this mountain. Even then, the voices in the forest were closer now. Whether real or imagined, they had served their purpose. Brix's men were backing toward their horses. The marshal himself kept glancing at the tree line. "This isn't over," he said. "No, it's not. I'll find you. You'll try." He mounted his horse with the careful dignity of a man retreating without admitting defeat. His deputies followed suit, their relief obvious in the way they turned their horses toward the valley trail. 6 months, Brix called back as they rode away. That's how long winter will protect you. Come spring, I'll bring enough men to turn this mountain inside out. His voice faded with the sound of hoofbeats. Soon they were alone again under the darkening sky. The Apache warriors who had been calling from the forest emerged into the open, all three of them. Not exactly an army, Tahoma said weakly. Didn't need to be, just needed to sound like one. Keem was already moving toward his leader, checking the fever, assessing what the stress of capture had cost them. The other Apache men stood silent in the snow, processing what had just happened. Yana approached her slowly. His face carried shame thick as winter frost. I thought I could save them, he said. I know. I've doomed us all instead. Maybe, or maybe you've shown us we're stronger together than apart. She looked around at the 7 Apache men, the captured bounty hunters' supplies, the mountain that had sheltered her for 17 years and might shelter them all for whatever time remained. Spring would bring Marshal Brix back with an army, but winter still held the mountain in its grip, and winter gave them time to prepare for the war that was surely coming. Time to decide whether they would face it as strangers thrown together by circumstance or as something else entirely, something that might survive even the worst the world could throw at them. The hidden canyon lay 3 days north through terrain that tested every step. Solace led them along paths she had mapped in her mind but never walked with company. Narrow ledges above 1,000-foot drops, creek beds that disappeared into stone, places where one wrong turn meant death for all of them. Tahoma's fever broke on the 2nd day. Keem's careful tending and the thin mountain air had burned the poison from his blood. By the time they reached the canyon entrance, the Apache leader could walk without support. The canyon opened before them like a secret the mountain had kept for centuries. Steep walls that caught morning light and held it until evening. A stream that never froze, fed by underground springs. Grass that grew green even under snow. This will do, Tahoma said quietly. They built shelters from deadfall timber and stone, not the temporary structures of travelers but the solid construction of people planning to stay. Solace found herself working beside men she had barely known a month before, their hands moving in rhythm as they raised walls against the coming cold. Xiana worked harder than any of them. His betrayal had wounded something deep in his spirit. Now he tried to rebuild trust through labor, through carrying more than his share, through staying silent when others might have demanded forgiveness. But forgiveness came anyway. It arrived one evening when Keem found Ayana sitting alone by the stream, staring at water that reflected stars he couldn't see. You tried to save us, the young healer said simply. I nearly got us all killed. Nearly. But didn't. Ayana looked up at him. How do you live with mistakes that big? By making sure they matter, by learning from them. One by one, the others offered their own quiet absolution. Not words exactly, but inclusion. Shared meals, requests for help with tasks that required trust. Tahoma spoke with him last on a morning when frost painted the canyon walls silver. What did you learn from this? The leader asked. That fear makes us do stupid things. And that some people are worth trusting even when trust feels impossible. Tahoma nodded. Then you learned what you needed to learn. Winter deepened around their hidden valley. The outside world disappeared behind walls of snow and ice. Marshal Brix and his threats felt distant as yesterday's storm. But Solace knew spring would come, and with it, reckoning. She began teaching the Apache men about mountain warfare, how to use terrain as a weapon, how to disappear into stone and timber, how to make 6 people sound like 60 when voices echoed through the right canyons. They taught her things in return. Hunting techniques her 17 years of solitude had never required. Ways of reading, whether that went deeper than watching clouds. The patience that came from living with people instead of surviving despite them. One evening, as snow fell soft outside their shelters, she told them about her daughter. Her name had been Grace. 7 years old when fever took her. bright and curious and brave enough to follow her mother into the unknown rather than accept the chains they had been born into. She would have liked you, Solace said, watching firelight dance across faces that had become familiar as family. She always trusted people faster than I did. Smart girl, Tahoma replied. Too smart for her own good sometimes. But as she spoke the words, Solace realized the sting had faded. The memory of Grace still carried sadness, but it no longer felt like a wound that would never heal. Surrounded by people who listened without judgment, the past had become something she could carry instead of something that carried her. Spring came early that year. The stream ran higher with snowmelt. Green shoots pushed through soil that had been frozen for months, and with the warming weather came the sound they had all been dreading. Hoofbeats, many of them, coming up the mountain trails with the methodical persistence of an army on the march. Marshal Brix had kept his promise, but the people waiting for him in the hidden canyon were not the same frightened fugitives he had faced in winter. They had become something else through months of shared hardship and mutual trust. They had become a family worth fighting for. The battle lasted 3 days, not the violent clash of armies but a careful game of misdirection and patience. Avalanches triggered at precisely the right moments. False trails that led pursuit in circles. Voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. On the 3rd day, Marshal Brix called for parley. He rode alone into the canyon, his uniform dusty from days of fruitless searching. His eyes took in the solid shelters, the signs of permanent settlement, the faces of people who had found something worth defending. "You can't hide here forever," he said. "Don't need forever," Solace replied. "Just need long enough." Long enough for what? For the world to change, for bounties to expire, for better men to take your job. Brix studied her face in the morning light. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "You know I have to keep coming. I know you have to try." He turned his horse toward the canyon entrance. At the narrow gap between stone walls, he paused. "Your brother wasn't a good man, Marshal," Solace called after him. "He got what he deserved." "Maybe," Brix said without turning around. "But that's not for me to decide." His voice carried no anger anymore. Just the tired resignation of a man carrying out duties he no longer believed in. They watched him ride away through the canyon mouth. This time his departure felt different, final maybe, or at least the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Years passed. The hidden canyon filled with other outcasts who found their way to the sanctuary Solace and the Apache men had built. Former slaves, exiled tribe members, people whose only crime was refusing to accept a world that saw them as less than human. The settlement grew. Children were born. Gardens flourished in soil that had never known cultivation. What began as a hiding place became a home. Solace stood on the canyon rim one morning, watching the sun rise over a community that thrived in defiance of every law designed to destroy it. 17 years of solitude had taught her survival. But these people had taught her something more valuable. They had taught her how to live. Below, she could see Tahoma teaching young ones how to read weather signs. Keem tending a garden of healing plants. Iyana, gray-haired now, showing newcomers how to build shelters that would last through mountain winters. All of them older, all of them marked by the years, all of them free. The mountain wind carried voices from the settlement. Children laughing. Adults planning the day's work. The sound of people who belonged somewhere, who had found their place in a world that would have preferred they disappear. A new group of travelers appeared at the canyon entrance that afternoon. 3 women and 2 men, all carrying the hollow-eyed look of people who had run as far as they could run. Solace walked down to meet them. Her hair was white now, her face lined by decades of weather and worry, but her step was steady and her voice was strong. "You're safe here," she told them. The same words Tahoma had spoken to her all those years ago. The same promise that had changed everything. The mountain had brought them all together. Now it sheltered the family they had chosen to become. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.